Gardner Minshew versus Mitch Trubisky. Which superstar quarterback will prevail in this big playoff matchup this weekend? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listens of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts and your Pittsburgh Steelers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hicks of horseshoehuddle.com and obviously here on Locked On Colts. I'm joined today by Christopher Carter of Locked On Steelers. We're going to be talking about this pivotal playoff matchup featuring, like I said at the top of the show, two star-studded quarterbacks in Gardner Minshew, Mitchell Trubisky, everything that everyone hoped for out of a big playoff matchup late in the season. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to have some fun today, guys. We're going to talk about the biggest story in this matchup for both teams. We're going to talk about the biggest matchups in general in this game, and then we're going to close it out with our predictions. But Chris, since you are my guest today, start us off with the biggest story in this one. Again, playoff matchup between Trubisky and Gardner Minshew. That's got to be a great story, right?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing is that these two teams are at a crossroads for where they're at. The Colts were just on a great run, had won 4 in a row, looking really tough, just beat the Titans in overtime, beat the Buccaneers, Patriots and Panthers, and everything was looking like, hey, things are shaping up. Then you lose to the Bengals by 20. Doesn't really change that. It doesn't make them a bad team just by that alone, but it does kind of stop the progress. Meanwhile, the Steelers have been in a state of free fall for the past 2 games, losing to the Patriots and the Cardinals in just embarrassing fashion. And so that's where I think the biggest story is which team can kind of avoid beating itself the most in this game, right? Because the Colts are a team that, look, they've dealt with a lot of injuries. Jonathan Taylor started off the year hurt. Gardner Minshew's your starting quarterback. It ain't been pretty. It's been a lot. The Steelers have dealt with a lot of injuries. They're missing Kenny Pickett. They're down to like their 3rd, 4th, and 5th linebackers available right now. Cam Hayward missed 2 months. Deontay Johnson missed a month. Pat Freiermuth missed a month. Micah Fitzpatrick missed a month. Everybody in the NFL is dealing with injuries right now. It is just insane. But I really think this comes down to which team can lean on a strength more often in this game. Can the Colts lean on an offense that has found a way to be efficient this year at times, even with all the injuries that it's had? Can the Steelers lean on a defense that has basically won it pretty much every game that it's been in so far? That, I think, will be the tale of this game, and whichever unit is leaned on more and produces more for their side, that's going to be the unit that wins the game.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think when you're looking at this matchup, again, I know I jokingly have been talking about the quarterbacks here, but it really comes down to the coaching. It comes down to the other players on the rosters for these two teams because, in this day and age of the NFL where we talk game managers versus game changers, neither of these guys are really either of those things. These guys are both backup quarterbacks, and they're backup quarterbacks for a reason. So for you to win games with these guys as your starters, it comes down to what kind of coaching staff you have, what you're getting out of your coaches, how energetic your team is coming into the game, and also what other star players are making the plays in this game. And both these teams have plenty of star players. Colts with DeForest Buckner, Quentin Nelson, Michael Pittman Jr., Steelers, Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt if he ends up playing in this game. Alex Highsmith's been playing great this year too. Like a lot of really, really good players on both sides of the ball. But for me, again, I'm going to go back to the quarterback thing just for a second, though. Which quarterback makes fewer mistakes? That's the biggest storyline in this one. Which quarterback doesn't cost their team the game? Now, Gardner Minshew has been just a fascinating quarterback to watch this year because when he came in relief of Anthony Richardson early this season, it was game manager stuff. Get the ball out quick, move the offense, don't make too many mistakes. We're going to be good. And then when he became the de facto starter, it was super high volatility where it was going to be 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, 3 fumbles, all in one game. Like, you're going to get the full spectrum. There's going to be no punts because it was either a touchdown or a turnover. That was every single series. And now we've seen these last couple of weeks where it's kind of bounced around, where some games of game manager, some games were inefficient offense and just a stagnant offense. So you don't really know what you're getting out of Gardner Minshew. And then you look at Mitchell Trubisky, where the last couple of weeks against two opponents that, I mean, the Patriots game, it makes sense. Patriots have a great defense. It's tough in that one, but Cardinals, you would have liked to see more, even though he was coming in relief in that game. But still, it's Mitchell Trubisky. He's been to the playoffs before. He's not the worst quarterback in history to have right now. I'm not saying he's anything special, but it really comes down to these two quarterbacks. Who is going to make fewer mistakes, who can actually move their offense whatsoever in this game. And it's crazy, again, that we're talking about a playoff matchup this late in the season where it's like, okay, Gardner Minshew, Mitchell Trubisky, who's going to make the play that wins the game for these playoff teams right here?
Well, I think it's what you said before. It's who doesn't lose the game for their team, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to come down to limiting the interceptions, and both these guys have thrown quite a few of those in the wrong spots for their team so far. Gardner Minshew right now 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, throwing interceptions 2.1% of all of his throws. Mitch Trubisky 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, throwing interceptions at a 3.6% rate for all of his throws. The one thing I'll say too on this is part of this is also getting used to the situation. Mitch Trubisky has stepped in for 3 games now. The 2 first games he stepped in the middle of 4 games now. He stepped in for a little bit against the Texans, stepped in for a little bit against the Jaguars, stepped in for a little bit against the Cardinals, and then started against the Patriots. But in all those situations, he did not practice all week as the starting quarterback until the Patriots game. And even then, that was like 2 walkthrough practices. And then, and basically, on short weeks, and especially after, when your team is bruised up and coming off, a physical fight, that's a lot to ask. But Mitch Trubisky is making $10 million in salary. That's a salary cap hit. This is what you pay him for. He has to be able to come in. He doesn't have to be a superstar. He doesn't have to throw 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. Just don't throw the 3 interceptions part of that. Come in, win a decent percentage of your third downs, anywhere between 40 to 50% of your third downs. Keep drives alive. Make competent throws. Take what's there. You don't have to force it all the time, and take your aggressive shots when you see a one-on-one that really works in your favor. But that's the big thing that Mitch Trubisky has to do right now. And I think that it's a lot simpler than when people try to make it out to be sometimes. And the thing is that he hasn't shown that so far in the first half of that Patriots game until he threw that touchdown that he did. He looked lost and confused. And whenever the Patriots were bringing certain things, he was like unsure where to go with the ball when the plays were clearly designed and there were options open everywhere for him. That's what the Colts have to do, is they have to try to keep him off balance, give him looks he's not able to recognize, find ways to try to confuse him and keep him from finding his feet and make him, kind of scatterbrained and looking throughout. If they do that, they'll get those turnovers, and that'll help them a lot in this game.
Yeah, definitely. Now, coming up, guys, we're going to talk about the biggest matchups in this game. There's quite a few that go beyond just the quarterback, especially when we're looking at some of the stars on the Colts offensive line versus the stars on the Steelers defensive line. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But first, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Guys, I know this time of year can be crazy. Personally, I go over to my family's house every single year, and I know I host a podcast, but I'm not great in social situations, guys. It's killer for me. Just being around even family, it's tough just being in those situations. And when I'm really feeling just anxious and stressed out about those situations in general, therapy can be kind of that crutch that really helps you out. So if you're thinking of starting therapy at all, give BetterHelp a try. I haven't personally used BetterHelp, but again, I've used therapy quite a bit in my life to help me with those social anxieties and just anxieties in general. BetterHelp is unique, though, because it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. In a season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, guys, we're diving into biggest matchups in this game. Chris, I'll let you kick us off yet again. What's the matchup that's caught your eye in this game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Pittsburgh Steelers?
One that people might not talk about a lot because of just the name involved here, but Kylen Granson and Will Mallory and how the tight ends are used by the Colts in this game. The Steelers had been one of the better covering tight end teams in the NFL going into about 3 weeks ago. They had allowed 1 touchdown to tight ends at that point. Their yards were pretty much down. And then all of a sudden, after losing Cole Holcomb, their starting inside linebacker, and then Quan Alexander, their number 2 inside linebacker, they are down to Landon Roberts, who's played very well. And I actually think, I tweet out as a joke, almost every game, Landon Roberts for president, because there's things that he does that he just shouldn't be able to do. But behind him, and the thing is, they signed all 3 of those guys this offseason in order to be prepared for if at least 1 injury came. But now 2 injuries have come that have taken those guys out for the year. And that's led to practice squad guys like Michael Walker having to fill in. And Michael Walker did a good job the first week or 2. But then eventually teams were like, oh, we should throw at him because he's from the practice squad. And after allowing just 1 touchdown through, I think, 12 games, in the last 3 games, the Steelers have given up 4 touchdowns to tight ends. And Mike Tomlin talked about that on Monday during his press conference. And that's something that I think is going to be a big note in this game is can the Colts offense run the ball? If they can run the ball, this game becomes, a very, folds in their favor. But if the run doesn't work, making things easier for Gardner Minshew can sometimes just simply be is get him some easy looks to some bigger targets down the middle part of the field, attack the weakness of this defense. And right now, that is its inside linebacker group that has been completely banged up. I would try to avoid messing with Joey Porter Jr. and Patrick Peterson. They have been pretty decent, especially in the past month and a half to 2 months. I'd try to avoid Minkah Fitzpatrick as much as I can. Why go after those guys when you can attack the Steelers linebacker situation? That's a key matchup, in my opinion, the Colts have to exploit in this game.
Yeah, and I'll actually add a little wrinkle to that too. After I say one thing though, Landon Roberts, one of my all-time favorite draft prospects. I loved Landon Roberts so much out of college. A fantastic player to watch. Plays with his hair on fire every single snap. Really fun player. But one more little wrinkle to add to that is Josh Downs in this equation here. Now the Colts do a really good job of when they go into empty personnel, they'll have Downs as the weak side number 2 receiver, and that'll put the defense, in a choice. You're going to have a linebacker go out there and cover him, or you're going to have a safety or maybe another corner come out and cover him. Now, if the Steelers opt to put a linebacker over him, you're going to get Downs on those little option routes. You're going to get him coming quick on those little quick hitters over the middle, or maybe even outbreaking type routes as well. The Colts love to do that on 3rd and short to get easy conversions. So if you're putting him against practice squad linebackers there in space, that's going to be a big advantage for the Indianapolis Colts in this game. So I love that shout out there with that matchup. And that's something we're going to look at there. Keeping on that side of the ball, though, with the Colts offense versus the Steelers defense, it really comes down to the trench warfare for me. What kind of game are we getting from the Colts offensive line? And obviously on the other side, what we're getting from the Steelers defensive line. The injury report will play a big part in this with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith both. I believe they're both going through the concussion protocol right now, right?
They are going through the concussion protocol, but they were listed as limited participants in the Tuesday practice. We were recording this Wednesday around 1 p.m. Eastern time, so we still haven't seen the Wednesday practice report. From talking to Cam Hayward and guys like that in the locker room, I really get the sense that both of these guys are going to play. They're preparing right now as if they won't, and they have Nick Herbig, the rookie out of Wisconsin, who they've really liked this year, Marcus Golden, an NFL veteran. Both of those guys are being prepared as if they'd be in charge of those positions. But from what I hear, I think the team fully expects, unless there's some sort of drop off, that both Watt and Highsmith should be good to go in this game. That's huge because, like you said, the trenches are a big part of it. And for the Steelers, the trenches are where they have to win all their games right now, because defensive side of the ball, they got playmakers, that can make plays at different spots. But on the offense, the big thing that's gotten them going in their best days is the running game and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Now, Najee Harris, he didn't practice on Tuesday. That's something to watch. If he doesn't return this week, it could be down to Jalen Warren, who's played very well for the Steelers this year. But he's never had to carry the load by himself. And I think that's something that the Steelers, when they had a streak for they were rushing for over 150 yards for about 4 straight games just a little bit ago. That streak snapped when they lost to the Cardinals. And that part of that was because they fell behind so much. But this has to be a team that, especially on offense, you've got to be able to win in the trenches. And then on defense, you've got to be able to get after Gardner Minshew. And you got to be able to stuff the run. You win. You get those 3 things. To me, if there's a 3 keys to the game, it's that right there for the Steelers. Yeah. Don't let the Colts run. Get the pressure on Gardner Minshew and run the doggone ball so that Mitch Trubisky doesn't have to be your superhero. They do those 3 things, the Steelers will be fine. Problem is they haven't done enough of those consistently the last 2 weeks against lesser opponents than the Colts, who have brought some really good fights this year.
Yeah, and let me list my three keys for the Colts in this game. It's going to be stop the run, it's going to be get after Mitch Trubisky, and it's going to be run the dang ball on the other side for the Indianapolis Colts. So I think we're talking similar teams here, very very similar teams.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't do any of those things last week in Cincinnati Bengals. They need to do it this week, obviously against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And just going back again to that trench battle with Watt and Highsmith likely playing, Hayward in there. I think I saw Keanu Blanton got bumped up too to starter recently. So that's a very, very strong defensive line. The Colts are coming off a game where their offensive line was thoroughly beaten for the first time, it feels like, all season. They've had a very strong offensive line all year. Bernhard Raimann has played really well at left tackle. Will Fry is at right guard. And then obviously the big three of Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith's not going to play in this game, but Braden Smith would have been out there as well. They played really well all season long. But last week was not one of their better performances. They got dominated. They couldn't run the ball. Minshew was under duress a lot in that game. Bernhard Raimann had his worst game of the season. They need that bounce back despite playing an even tougher defensive line this week, because if they can't run the ball in this game and you're asking Gardner Minshew to drop back 40 times against this Steelers pass rush and Minka Fitzpatrick and Joey Porter Jr. out there in the secondary, it's not going to be a good day for your offense. And how much can this Colts defense really hold up? Even though they're going against Trubisky, how much can your defense hold up when your offense isn't scoring points? So I really do think that trench battle, especially on that side of the ball, though, is going to be the biggest aspect of this entire game.
I agree. It's going to be the biggest aspect here. The Steelers have won so many games simply because TJ Watt and/or Alex Highsmith changed the game, and also you have Cam Hayward back, which is big. Yeah. Like you said, and Keanu Benton, he has been such an underrated part of this defense. And I loved him in the draft. I talked to him at the combine, so I'm not all that surprised by Keanu Benton playing as well as he has. But man, he has matured quickly, and he's become a force that the Steelers definitely have in their favor right now. That's where I think the Steelers can kind of get an advantage here, is if they can try to win that line of scrimmage consistently, don't let the run game get going and pressure Gardner Minshew, everything else falls into their play. And that's the way they need to play right now. They have to be able to play that way if they hope to win any of their final four games right now. And this is also even bigger than just the on-field part of this. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. I know everyone knows that statistic, right? But part of it is because when the Steelers have had the chips down to fall beneath that line and fall sub below 500 at the end of the year, so many times they've responded to his challenges like, hey, let's get this win. And a lot of times the challenge is simply do your job, get it done right, and get done what's right in front of you. The game plan's there, execute. And we have never seen a Pittsburgh Steelers team since 2007 when he took over fail to meet that expectation. And they've certainly fallen short in other respects. There's been times where they've been performing, and you're like, man, this team should be better than it is. But then there's plenty of times where they're overperforming, and I think you could look at the past few years as examples of that. And I think that right now the script still needs to be written for them to decide: do they overperform to start this season when they open up to be 7-4, or are they underperforming right now? And if they can, after losing those last two games and 3 out of their last 4. They can write the script themselves. And that's where Mike Tomlin has gotten guys to focus on. And something I talked about for my Wednesday episode on Locked On Steelers, going into the locker room, there's not a sense of hey, this is it. This is urgent week. This is playoff game. There's a sense of, hey, we got to stay the course, man. We got to do what we're being coached to do. We have to stay focused. I think that's a good thing in the Steelers' favor for that. But everyone's been wondering in Pittsburgh, will the day ever come that the Steelers fall below that line where they do have that losing season? They lose this game, they put themselves in a position where they're very close to having so. And if they lose this game, they're 7-7. They would have three games left. They would still have to lose 2 of those last 3 to get there. But this is still a chance where if they win this game, they're all of a sudden they're 8-6. They're higher up in the playoff conversation. They'll have beaten one of the teams that they need to kind of stay ahead of in the playoff conversation. That's why I think that this week is going to be very unique for a Mike Tomlin team in how they respond. And if they do respond, it'll be like, hey, that team clearly still follows that, and they're fighting in that occasion. But if they don't respond and the Colts win, that will be something I don't think we've seen from a Mike Tomlin team ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, coming up, guys, we're going to talk about our predictions for this big near playoff type game this Saturday. But first, as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers Stay Hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning of $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, include spreads, player props, over-unders, and even more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. Obviously, go to FanDuel right now, put all your money on the Indianapolis Colts this week because, look, it's a playoff game. We got it. We got this, guys. We got this. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Chris. So we're talking Indianapolis Colts, Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, playoff atmosphere this week. It's on Saturday. It's a primetime type game. Really exciting game between these two teams. Again, not the most exciting quarterback matchup, but we'll have fun with it. What do you think happens this week? What's your prediction for how the game goes? And obviously, what's your score prediction for this weekend's game?
I think this will be one of the closer games this weekend. I think these two teams are going to be in a drag-them-out fight. Heck, these two teams met last year, granted under different regimes and everything. But I think it's going to be a very similar game. Low scoring, slow paced. Everyone's going to be like, why am I watching this? Because there's no offense. But then you're going to see defensive plays get made and who makes the first turnovers, who creates the first turnovers, who gets after the quarterback more. And the Steelers haven't done it of late, but I have to think that they're doing it this week because I look at these last two losses. I have not seen a Steelers team that's fallen below that. And granted, I hadn't seen a Steelers team lose back-to-back games like that ever in my time watching them since Bill Cowher been coaching. They had 3 losing seasons at one point. That's where I think that this Steelers team, and again, just talking to them, there's not a sense of like, hey, we don't have it this year. We have to change something completely drastic to have it. There's a sense of like, hey, this is right in front of us. Like we control. The Steelers still control their destiny. They handle their business and beat either teams they've already beaten or teams that they match up, well with. They're in the playoffs, and then who cares how you got there? You made the playoffs, and that's where I think the Steelers are in a good position to win and fight this game. I still think this comes down to a coin flip. I don't blame anybody for picking the Colts this week. I think it's going to be something like a weird score, like 18-14 or something like that, and there'll be like extra points blocked and safeties, and just it's going to be ridiculously stupid, but it's going to be a game I think that they find to gut out and win on the road here. And I think the biggest factor again will be a forced turnover, a big play made by the defense, maybe even a defensive touchdown that puts the Steelers over the top. What say you, Zach?
I think there's a couple things that work against the Colts in this game, and maybe I'm looking too much at history and recent history in general. The Colts historically, they suck against the Steelers. They really, really stink against the Steelers.
It's weird, right? I was looking at that too. I'm like, I just thought like, oh, Peyton Manning all those years, and Peyton Manning certainly had his way with the Steelers sometimes, but I was just like, I thought there'd be a lot more of those.
No. The Colts really, really struggle against the Steelers. I know all Colts fans listening to this are like, yep, this is the one game we all pencil as a loss before the season just because it's the Steelers. Like, it's just what happens. The Colts don't beat the Steelers. So you have that working against it. You have obviously the curse of 2021 season where the Colts had control your own destiny to get in the playoffs and they just fell apart late in the season. You have all these things that feels like working against Indianapolis Colts, and you really want to see this Colts team turn the corner from all those previous curses under Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen, I think, has done a fantastic job coaching this team this year, getting this team to 7-6 with all the injuries, like you mentioned. Again, no Jonathan Taylor for majority of the season. Shaquille Leonard not being the player that he was and ultimately being released. That was one of your superstar players right there, gone for the year. You got Grover Stewart, who was suspended for 6 weeks in the middle of the season, and your run defense completely corroded without him, obviously there. Oh, and then Anthony Richardson, the quarterback that you designed your entire offense for, only plays 2.5 quarters throughout 2.5 games throughout the whole year. So the Colts have had to adjust so much on the fly, and they've been able to beat teams that they should be beating. They've even stolen a couple games from like the Ravens and the Texans where they shouldn't have won those games in there. So the Colts, I think, are a really well-coached team. They're a team that's going to come out ready for this game. But I think the Steelers are equivalently the same type of team, really well-coached team. It's going to come out with a lot of energy. And I think it's going to be like what you said. It's going to be one of those two boxers exchanging blows. Now, these aren't two heavyweight fighters. They're just boxers in general.
I'd say middleweights,
Yeah, some middleweight fighters exchanging some punches. But I think it's going to be one of those ugly games, like a 16-13 or something like that in this one. But it really comes down to, again, which quarterback makes more/fewer mistakes, which quarterback's going to lose the game for their team and which defense takes over in this one and makes some plays happen. I do think the Steelers have more playmakers on their defense, but I do think the Colts have the slight advantage in quarterback play. So it could really go either way in this one. I think it's going to be a coin flip, like you said. And the fact that we get to watch this in prime time, oh, I can't imagine, guys, a better primetime game for this Saturday. So, Chris, before we go today, what is your score prediction, though, for this game? Did you have a final team that you're picking? I know you picked the Steelers, but what do you have as your actual score for this one?
I'm saying 18-15 or 18-14, something right around there. It's going to be stupid. You're going to hate it. You're going to get through that and be like, why did I waste my Saturday afternoon and an early part of the evening watching this game? But I think the Steelers, this is how they've won so many times. It's how they've won all their games this season. And I think that blueprint, if they can get back to that, they find a way to pull it out. What about you, Zach?
Yeah, look, the Colts are 1-0 in primetime games here. They won 10-6 over the Patriots in primetime. I think it's going to be one of those type of games, though. Like I said, 16-13, I'm going to go Colts, continue the ugly primetime play so nobody wants to see us on TV ever again after this season. But 16-13 Colts. But like you said, I could see this going either way. I think it is going to be one of those low-scoring games. But then again, I thought the Browns game against the Colts earlier this season was going to be that, and it ended up being like a 40-something point explosion by each team. So we'll see what's truly in store this Saturday. Chris, thank you for joining me for this crossover episode. For all you guys just tuning in or new to the show at all, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today, which is the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube. If you guys are watching us on YouTube, this video will redirect over to that right after we're done playing. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur, which is my co-host that was not here today, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, follow Chris on Twitter as well, at Carter Critiques. Really, really fun follow on there. He has more followers than me. I'm not jealous. It's fine. It's whatever. Also, subscribe to both of our channels on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' reviews, and we'll see you guys back here bright and early tomorrow morning.